and welcome. I am so happy that you're here. My name is Glenda Masters, and I will be your presenter for this afternoon's session. I am the Cultural Arts Manager for the City of Lee's Summit, which is a city within the state of Missouri within the United States. As the Cultural Arts Manager, much of my responsibility is to work with our local arts and cultural organizations to partner together to bring engaging and exciting cultural experiences for our community. Now, the pandemic has certainly put a stop to much of that. But this presentation is about resiliency, and it is our story about how the City of Lee's Summit, our local government, and our nonprofit organizations, cultural organizations, came together to create an entirely new engagement opportunity at a time when gathering was really hard to do and still is a little challenging. So without further ado, I'm going to hop off and pull up my slides and let's get started. Thanks so much.
All right, so I have my slides here and they are working and it looks like we are ready to go. So again, welcome to my presentation today. And again, we are going to be talking about resiliency for a small community in the middle of America. And we're going to be talking about how launching an Arts and Culture Week really did light a fire, so to speak, to help reignite our community's arts sector during the time of COVID. So again, I hope you are excited and are ready to learn something and see how we did. So before we dive in, I wanted to share a little bit about myself. I am Glenda Masters, and I am the Cultural Arts Manager for the City of Lee's Summit in the state of Missouri, again, in the United States. And so I am an arts administrator. I have been doing this for close to 20 years. And I think what has been really been exciting about my career in the arts is that I've had really the honor of working in both the nonprofit sector for the arts as well as the government sector. And so that alone kind of brings a really unique perspective to the arts sector as a whole. So just kind of knowing that both the nonprofit or the non-governmental sector and both the governmental sector of the arts industry, we're all really working towards the same goal, but each entity may do that a little bit differently based on the resources that they have. And so it's been a really great experience just learning how both types of arts entities or arts agencies might operate. And it gives me a better understanding of how those two types of entities, both the nonprofit and the government sector, can work well together. I think when you understand how the other sector operates, it makes it easier to partner and to collaborate. So that's just kind of been a really fun highlight of my career so far. And so throughout my time in arts administration or arts management, I've really come to develop the specialization in fundraising, in board governance, and organizational structure, and as well as strategic planning. I really love working with organizations and helping to kind of plan that long-term vision and to kind of create those goals and those strategies and those step-by-step tactics that we would use to accomplish our mission. So before we really dive into the presentation, I wanted to answer probably the one big burning question that everyone has today is, where the heck is Lee's Summit, Missouri? So I know that this is an international conference, and so we have people from all over the world. And so we may not be familiar with where the state of Missouri is. And so I wanted to give a really quick geography lesson before we dive in. And so we have the United States of America. And so this red state right here, that is the state of Missouri, with a cute little boot hill right here that we call it. And then the little dot right here is roughly about where the City of Lee's Summit is. We are really close to the border of Missouri and the state of Kansas. And so we're kind of considered one of those border towns. But that's just a little overview of kind of where I am in relation to all of you who might be listening in today, just to kind of give you a little geographical scope of where we are. Also, just quickly, a little bit about us as a city. let's see, we are a suburban community of Kansas City. Kansas City, Missouri is kind of like the major metropolitan area that's really close to us, just by about 20 minutes, a 20-minute drive. And we have a population of just under 100,000 people, and we are growing pretty quickly. In addition to that, we're a pretty eclectic mix of what you might find in an everyday community. We're a mix of retail and manufacturing industry, health services. We have a pretty robust technology industry here, as well as partnership education services with local universities and things like that. We also have a pretty robust arts and cultural community. So we have a lot of community arts groups. So we have a community orchestra, community theater, community artist guild. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of festivals, both, arts festivals and kind of more things like Oktoberfest, and then just kind of downtown gatherings and farmers markets and things like that. And again, like many communities, we have public art, visual arts opportunities, and history museums. So what we will cover in this presentation is just a really brief highlight of what quarantine was like here for us and for our arts community, what was kind of going on for us. And then we'll talk about how we came up with the idea of Lee Summit Arts and Culture Week and why we decided to do it in October of 2020. There's a very specific reason why we decided to do that. And then we'll give an overview of the key partners that really helped us make this happen so quickly. And then diving into the timeline and some key tactics that we use to promote the event. And then once we launched the event, we had some really fun highlights and some really great experiences during the week. And then kind of wrapping it up, we'll talk about some challenges that we encountered along the way, just some things we weren't quite expecting and how we overcame them. And then some major takeaways finally, and what we really enjoyed learning about the experience and what we hope to incorporate into new programming, or as we hope to do this again in the future. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go. Okay, so arts in quarantine. So for us here, regionally in kind of the Midwest region of the United States, March 16th was really that day in which quarantine began for us. I remember it very, very vividly. It was a Monday, and I know that our community theater organization had just wrapped up a weekend of a theater production that they were doing, and they unfortunately were not able to finish the theatrical production. They couldn't complete their run because the university that they were presenting at closed down in the middle of the week. And so they lost about half of their production time. And so kind of from there, everything began to close down, much like it did everywhere else. So here's a little bit about what happened in our community here. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened. So we experienced the same exact scenario that happened really all across the country and probably just about everywhere in the world, where everything shut down because everyone had to be home for quarantine. And so this kind of progressed throughout the summer. And again, no different than probably what was going on everywhere else. But, as the summer progressed, there was kind of this hopeful optimism that perhaps in the fall time, we would still be able to kind of jump right back in to doing our programs and our festivals and those really iconic fall events that our community came to enjoy. However, that wasn't quite the case. So by August, that is kind of where, for us, for our arts community, some of that kind of defeat and shell shock, if you will, kind of began to really sit in. Again, thinking hopefully that we would be able to do our fall events. What we began to see with that first week of August is where all of those fall events began to get canceled. And so a lot of the events that we lost were, our Oktoberfest celebrations. We had an art festival that took place in October that had to be canceled. And then for our organizations, like our symphony and our theater, they were no longer able to produce their fall season opening performances, which also took place in October. So we had a lot of fall events that typically happened in October that all of a sudden, almost overnight, were no longer going to be happening. They had been canceled. And so kind of with that realization, I could see our arts community really getting nervous because all of these events were major revenue producers for them. And so these were events that helped get them through the fall and the winter and into the spring. And so without those events happening, they began to worry about how they were going to be generating their revenue. So that's where we began to kind of think as a community, well, if we can't do what we typically do, what could we do? And that's where the idea of creating the Lee Summit Arts and Culture Week really began to take shape. And we specifically chose the week of October 9th through October 18th, which actually was 10 days. So it was more than a week, but that gave us 2 weekends to work with. But yes, we chose those dates specifically because that is typically the week in October where we experience the most activity in terms of our arts and cultural events. So I can mention our arts festival. That's when we have our arts festival, that second weekend in October. And then both our local symphony and our local theater company will typically do their season opening performances either the second weekend in October or the third weekend in October. So we knew that there was a pattern, a tradition, if you will, of lots of cultural activity within the month of October and in a very specific time frame. So for me, as I kind of began to formulate this idea of, could we do this? Could we make an arts week happen? It made the most sense to pick a time when we typically had a lot of activity because our audiences and our community were used to having something going on during those times. And so I didn't want October to be silent and to be quiet. I wanted there to still be some kind of activity, even though we couldn't do what we typically did as a community. So this kind of goes into a little bit more detail about why exactly did we do it. And we, myself, over at the City of Lee Summit as the Cultural Arts Manager, our Arts Council, which is one of our citizen advisory boards, as well as some of our community arts organizations, all kind of agreed that the reason to do an Arts Week in October during a pandemic, at a time when we typically would have been busy anyways, was a good time to do that because it helped us do 3 important things. It helped us to activate, to create engagement, and to create awareness. And in terms of activating, it really helped our arts community that was struggling to address the pandemic and just simply didn't know what to do. I noticed that a lot of our organizations just had a really hard time adjusting to the parameters of our health guidelines. We could not have events of larger than 100 people. We couldn't do indoor events. And so we were having a hard time even just getting musicians and actors to be in the same space safely. And so it really challenged how we were going to be able to create cultural opportunities. We also wanted to create a way to engage artists and our citizens in cultural experiences safely. Even though we couldn't do what we had traditionally done, we knew that there was a way that we could still keep cultural experiences really kind of alive. And to keep arts and culture going in our community, we just had to explore how we could do that safely. And then finally, it was really important for us to bring awareness to our community that our arts and cultural organizations were still here. They were still open, they were still operational, and they were still ready to create and to, again, just create those experiences for the community. And likewise, we really needed to have that support from the community because we didn't want them to forget about our arts organizations. Because what we kind of know is that, people tend to focus on what's right in front of them. And as an arts organization, if you're not frequently communicating with your audiences or with your donors, they're going to kind of begin to forget about you a little bit, and they're going to begin to focus their time and their energy on other things. And we didn't want our community to forget. And we didn't want our community to kind of begin to, we wanted them we didn't want them to miss us, but we wanted them to just remember that we were still there and we were still ready to perform and to create. So we had some key partners to help us bring this to life in such a short amount of time. And so we started with our local government. And so it's basically where I work. So I work for the City of Lee Summit Cultural Arts Division. And so basically I provided the staff support to help bring the concept together, to help manage the logistics, and to facilitate the partnerships. So we were kind of like the lead driver of this whole entire Arts Week idea. We then brought in our Arts Council, which was, think of it, it's kind of like a board of directors, if you will, for the Cultural Arts Division. So they were a group of community volunteers, and their predominant role in creating the Arts and Culture Week was just help to promote the event to the community through social media, through networking, and through word of mouth. And then we brought in our, what we call our community partners. I reached out early on in the formation of the idea of an Arts and Culture Week to our Lee Summit Tourism Office. And so tourism, they got on board very, very quickly. They were excited to help. And the support that they provided was really around branding and marketing. They helped come up with the brand and the logo and the website for Arts and Culture Week. And they also helped manage the community calendar. We already had this resource in our community. And so it was really great to be able to leverage that resource. We didn't have to create anything from scratch. We didn't have to create a whole entire new calendar or schedule. We had one central place where artists and arts organizations could go and upload their activity information. And we had one central place where we could direct the public so that they can learn about all the different activities that were available. And then ultimately, this whole entire Arts and Culture Week was all about our community arts and cultural groups. So it was really important that we had their interest in participating and their creativity. And so you can kind of see from here that we had a wide range of organizations willing to participate and willing to help and to just kind of get creative and come up with something fun for the community. So I want to talk a little bit about our timeline because we really had a very, very short timeline to put this together. So after, well, actually the beginning of August, when we saw that a lot of the fall events were beginning to be canceled, that's when we started to formulate the idea of creating an Arts and Culture Week. And so really August for us was that kind of idea forming and kind of concept finalization. And once we brought on Lee Summit Tourism, that's when we began to kind of finalize the brand and to get the website created. So I think it's really important to note that first of all, we only had about 8 weeks, 2 months to bring this whole entire project together. And if you're familiar with marketing at all, 8 weeks is no time really to put anything together and to get anything out to the public with enough time to get their awareness. But you know what? We pushed through and we persevered, and I think we did a pretty good job overall. And so kind of what we did in August, from forming the idea to the concept creation and then getting a website created, that really took about 2 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks at the most. So this was a very, very fast moving process. And that was kind of one of the great things about this project, is how willing everyone was, how willing everybody was to work quickly. It was that kind of lighter, quicker, cheaper mindset of how can we do something quickly with minimal resources, but still with a high impact. And so this image over here is just an example of one of the social media posts that we did, kind of announcing the event and just kind of beginning to create some energy around that. And you'll see that we kind of posted this, or we did post this on September 11th. And that was kind of one of the first posts that we had in terms of just announcing the event. And you can see that we had a website created for it, as well as a way for people to link to that to learn more. And And so then the month of September, that was really where we began just fully communicating with the public, both our arts community as well as the general audiences as well. And so you can see an image, actual footage of me working social media in the month of September. September was a very, very busy month because that's when we were basically doing a lot of social media activity. We were sending weekly newsletters to our email list as well as our Arts Council's email list, and really communicating to both. We had two audiences. We had, again, the arts community, but then we also had the general public. And so communications to the arts community was really, it was more tactical. It was more step-by-step instructions on how they could create their events and how they could get their activities uploaded to our community calendar. And then communications to the public was more about just creating interest and awareness of this week-long celebration itself and all of the exciting activities that people could look forward to participating in. And so the promotion of this, I'll talk a little bit briefly. It really was grassroots marketing. It was things that we could do very quickly, things that did not take a lot of effort, didn't take a lot of time or resources. And really at the end of the day, our marketing expenses were less than $100. And money that we did spend was only spent on social media advertisements on Facebook. That's really the only cost that we put into this. And so I think this just really shows that you just, for something, we often think that for new programs and for new initiatives, it takes a lot of money to get it up and off the ground and a lot of money on advertising and marketing. And sometimes you don't need that. Sometimes you just have a strong enough audience already that you can just leverage, again, the resources that you already have and leverage the engagement that you already have. And so luckily, we were able to do a lot with very, very little funding. So in 2 months of planning, a lot of work, a lot of social media presence, October 9th arrived and we officially kicked off Lee Summit Arts and Culture Week. So I thought it was appropriate that we cue the confetti. And so what was really great is that over the course of those 10 days, we had 10 individual events listed on the community calendar. And so you can see we had a nice variety of both visual arts, music, history museum tours, sculpture walks for our public art, as well as both in-person and virtual events. So our community orchestra, the Lee Summit Symphony, did something really fun. They did pop-up concerts on street corners, and they also did that along, sidewalks, as well as some parks within our downtown district. And so a pop-up concert is something that's really easy to do. It doesn't take a whole lot of effort. It's more or less just kind of telling people when and where you're going to be. Just a couple of helpful tips if you decide to do something like this is that you want to be mindful of your setup. Try not to block any public right-of-ways. And do get permission from property owners if that's something that you want to do, like if you want to use someone's balcony or their patio or something like that. And then always remember to post those or make live videos and post those to social media. And this is just another image of another pop-up concert that our symphony did. Again, this was at a park in our downtown area. So it was nice. They said they had about 50 people show up for the concert, and everyone wore their masks and they all kept their distance. And it was just a really great, lovely, lovely event. And this is probably one of my favorite events. Our jazz orchestra did a rooftop concert. Again, this was in our downtown district, and they kind of took advantage of something, a pretty fun resource. Their founder actually owns a condo in our downtown area, and he happened to have a rooftop patio. And so he invited some members of the jazz orchestra to come up and they did a concert. So it was really great for people walking around downtown, walking on the sidewalks, and kind of being able to hear jazz music as they were doing it. And again, just some pictures from a plein air painting session that we did. So just kind of a lunchtime paint out at a park. This was organized by a local artist. And really very minimal effort. He simply just through his social media platforms and through his networks just said, hey, I am going to be at this park at noon on Wednesday. If you want to come and paint with me, grab your supplies and come on out. So we had a couple of artists do that, and that was a really fun event. It was really, really nice. And then what's also really great too is that kind of outside of this picture, down to the left, we have kind of a relatively busy roadway with also some retail shops. And so even though this particular event did not, have an audience, it was still in front of a pretty active area within our community. So it was visible to a lot of people, even though it wasn't specifically an event that required an audience. And then this one, I think I am probably the most proud of that we were able to pull off. And so this is art in empty storefronts. We had a retail shopping district that was experiencing a lot of vacancies even before COVID, but it was exacerbated during COVID. And the University of Missouri Visual Arts Department wanted to do a pilot program of art in empty storefronts. And so they connected together and they agreed to put an art exhibit in some vacant stores within this shopping district. And it was a really, really great event. It looks beautiful. And it was just something unique and different for our community. And so I'm glad that for the month of October, we were able to kind of do something different like this. So those are just a couple of highlights from our brand new arts and cultural event. And you know what? I think for doing it for the first time and putting it together in 8 really, really short weeks, we did a pretty good job. We made it work, and we did the best that we could do with the resources that we had available. And I think our arts community was really happy as well. And we did some really great things. So we gave ourselves a little bit of a pat on the back. And so as we kind of debriefed and wrapped things up and kind of looked back and said, well, what did we accomplish and what did we overcome? I thought it would be a good opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about the challenges that we experienced. And none of these are big things. They're just kind of little things that we noticed along the way. And so for me, I noticed that I took something for granted. I assumed that everyone, including our arts organization, knew what an Arts and Culture Week was. I had experienced different types of culture weeks or arts weeks from different places that I had lived at different times in my life. And so I just assumed that everyone knew what that was and what the general concept was. And I realized that for my arts organizations, they didn't really know what that was. They were assuming that it was, me as the city representative hiring them to do performances or hiring them to do activities. And that's not exactly what we were looking to do. What we were looking to do is just really create this space and to provide the opportunity for these organizations to come up with their own programming. And so some of the other things that I realized too during this adventure, this journey, was that we had a lot of organizations that just were not used to or accustomed to thinking outside of the box. Trying to think of creating programming outside of what they typically did was really challenging for some of them, especially as an example, our community symphony. They're used to doing major symphonic performances in major concert halls. They're not used to thinking about small chamber performances or what could they do with just a few musicians as opposed to many of their musicians. So that it took a little bit longer for organizations like that to come up with their programming, but in the end, they were able to come up with something, and they were able to come up with something that they were proud of presenting. And so in the end, I think it was great to kind of see their growth as an organization. Some of the other things that came up too, kind of previously talked about, was that some of those organizations wanted me to come up with their programs for them. In terms of they wanted me to tell them what they should be doing, when they should do it, and where they should do it. And so it was really kind of creating that dialogue of, again, as a city, we were not hiring anyone to perform. We were not, programming for anyone. And it was just really that we were creating that environment. We were creating that invitation and creating that space. And then what we were doing was just helping promote the organization and promote the event for them. And then sadly, some of the events still had to be canceled due to COVID outbreaks. And so, we kind of learned that in this, world of COVID, that planning out long-term or planning out far in advance is a really challenging thing to do because things can change overnight. No matter how much you plan, your performance can still be canceled, the day before the event because someone contracts COVID. And so that's kind of some of those things. You can't do anything about that. All you can do is just be flexible and just kind of go with the flow and just work with it. But ultimately, there were a lot of really positive takeaways. Again, I think as a community, we really embrace the idea of creating an arts and culture week. And I think, for us as a city and us as a community, I think the biggest thing that we learned is that we can just go for it. We don't have to spend so much time planning. We can actually come up with a concept and execute pretty quickly, and just kind of embracing the mindset of, done is better than perfect. We can spend, the next couple of years making it better and improving upon it every time we present Arts and Culture Week. But we don't have to be perfect the first time out. And then also, embracing that mindset of lighter, quicker, cheaper. I think I was really amazed, to realize that we only spent $100. We only spent $100 to create an entirely new program, an entirely new, marketing opportunity for our city. And so that was a really great thing to kind of walk away with as well. Many organizations even said, quite literally, that it lit a fire under them. It helped them see that small scale audience engagement and outreach events were absolutely possible. They didn't have to think big. They didn't have to think, the way they always had before. They could think smaller, and they can make a big impact with small events. And then finally, I think kind of one of the greatest takeaways from this is that the organizations began to see how they could continue or expand upon some of the programs and some of the events that were inspired by Arts and Culture Week. So for example, remember the jazz orchestra, right? Where they had that really fun rooftop concert. Well, immediately after Arts and Culture Week, they decided that they would program an entirely new outdoor patio events later on in the month. And so they realized that they could do it. They realized how easy it was to put together. And so they wanted to continue on. And then again, looking back at the arts and empty storefronts that we worked with this local shopping district and the local university, we've been able to take this program and to continue it as well. And so what we are now doing is, instead of working with the local university, we're working with the local high schools and giving the high school arts students a way to exhibit their work safely. And this was really important because the high school arts students also lost their ability to exhibit their work. And many of them have to do that in order to get graduation credit. And so this was a great way to kind of continue on with the kind of the pilot program and to grow and expand that as well. So there you have it. That has been our journey of, kind of how we felt at the beginning of the pandemic, and kind of we began to see a need in our community for how do we get our arts organizations to think small and to think about, creating engaging experiences in different ways. And how can we do that in a pandemic when meeting and gathering together just isn't an easy thing to do? And so I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you have any questions, these are all the different ways that you can get in touch with me. You have my email address, as well as both my personal website, where you can learn a little bit more about me and the things I do within the arts sector where I am. You can also learn a little bit more about the City of Lee's Summit Cultural Arts Division by visiting our website, lsculturalarts.net. And then you're also welcome to come and find me on social media as well. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And so if you have a question, or if you have a thought or any feedback about today's presentation, you have many different ways to reach me and to get in contact with me. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for the time that you've given me today to share with you about our journey. And I hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much.